Welcome all. We are live with a very important guest. You've seen him many times, and you all love his video a lot, especially to it. It appeals to your sensibilities. And so, without delay, I bring on Sri Abhijit Iyer.
Har Har Mahadev.
Hello, Mahadev. So, Abhijit, I've been seeing your last couple of videos on different channels, and you have been very, very critical on something which the Indian government or somebody is not doing. So, what is the strategic? Because I know you are a person who put thoughts behind what you say, and you have a deep research on it. So people may who don't know you may think that you're just rambling off, but
Hmm.
I know that you have a deep research behind it. So, what was the research that prompted you to to give those comments to the multiple TV channels? You're on virtually everywhere.
Hmm. Which one specifically?
Especially
Tell me which comments because I comment so much. I
on
don't
the
even remember what I said
on
where.
on the Republic TV, you
Hmm.
commented on the
Hmm.
current the sadhus. On the sadhus, you commented, and
Hmm.
then after that, you commented on the lack of strategic initiatives. You commented on one of the videos in Times Now, I believe, and
Yeah. So look, my whole thing there is that if you're running something called a Hindu government, okay, where everybody accuses you of being a Hindu nationalist, and I find that particularly hilarious coming from American journalists. Coming from European journalists, it's fine because we saw how destructive European nationalism was with Hitler and Mussolini, and of course all the other kinds of nationalism. French nationalism was no less toxic; it just didn't turn xenophobic the way German nationalism did, or genocidal. The French were quite genocidal in their colonies and things like that. Different matter, just as the British were, the Bengal famine, for example. Uh, my thing is when two sadhus are lynched, and they're not just lynched, the police drag them out of the police station and hand them over to the people lynching them, and your prime minister has no time for that. Okay. But he has time for talking about Shabana Azmi's broken nose. He has time for talking about actor Irfan Khan dying of cancer just 2-3 days after this sadhu episode, but none for the sadhus who are sort of it is because of people like them that we survived, where there's that Iqbal's famous line, na bachi Ruma na something. Rome got wiped away, all of them got wiped away, and we were the ones who survived of the old pagan religions. We were the only ones, pagan, quote unquote. We were the only ones who survived.
yeah.
So that that callousness irritates me, because this is going back into that I want a Nobel Peace Prize mode, and I'm willing to sell my country out for my Nobel Peace Prize. I'm willing to sell my ideology out. Now, look, I've never believed in ideology in a sense, but the only reason I believe in Hindutva is primarily because it's far superior to what surrounds us. And B, it is a question of civilizational existence. Because if you believe that your civilization is better, then it's worth protecting. Then protect it. Don't pretend to protect it and do nothing about it.
That's right.
So that was the basic thing about that.
So you brought up a very important point, and I think that's exactly where we wanted to come to: civilizational dichotomy between different worlds. Now, to put it mildly, even the U.S. After World War II, they enjoyed a sense of superiority and a control over the vast parts of the world. But today, they are getting eaten up from within. And you don't believe in ideology, but you also said that you consider Hindutva or Hinduism higher than or better than what surrounds us. That's what you said.
Mm.
The ideology that is eating United States is a leftist, ultra leftist ideology, which
Yeah.
has been ingrained in the universities to such an extent that even if you talk common sense and you can give references, still they are going to black you out.
Yeah.
So, so the scourge of the leftist and the Islamists are piggybacking on the leftist ideology is like cannot be described. Like people in US also have lost free speech
Yeah.
now. Like we are told anything we say we are bigoted, we are racist, we are xenophobic, we are anything we say. Now, coming back to my question to you is, how do we fight back this narrative? It is in US and it is in India, both
Yeah.
places.
So remember, one of the things about the left is socialism does not lead to more freedom, it always leads to less freedom. Historically, this is a proven fact, right? Remember, all of what we call free speech societies today are capitalist societies. Socialism works fine on a small scale like Sweden or Norway or Denmark. The problem is always scaling it up towards a heterogeneous, uh, large area, large scale population. This thing. Now, notice the correlation out here. Why does socialism come up in the West? It comes up in a post-religious West. Isn't it amazing that the Mayfair, that foundational myth of America, that it was the Pilgrim Fathers who landed in the Mayfair, Puritans basically escaping persecution from England. Now, remember, those Puritans, even by Elizabethan standards, those Puritans were religious loonies. And they come to America, and yet they create a society that celebrates free speech. Right? Now, this is what capitalism does. And what you find is it is the decline of religiosity that has now led to new means of social control, in this case political correctness. Because this is what was it, Rousseau or Voltaire, my favorite line, I forget who said it. I'll just say Abhijit Iyer Mitra said this: you may not require God, but you require religion. And why? Because see, for me, I'm within Hinduism we have two atheist strains, old Samkhya and Charvaka. Samkhya has mutated, but Charvaka still remains very atheist. And I don't need a religion or political correctness to tell me that hurting an animal is wrong, that kicking somebody who's already down is wrong. These are basic things that I've been trained into, and I have a sense of right or wrong about it. But clearly most of society does not, which is why you needed religion and morality in that sense to control society. And what happened was that after the fall of the Soviet Union, because there was no visible threat, America moves into this post-religious phase, and they realize that they need some form of social control. And so what happens is you have the left that comes back with all this new speak. And mind you, I use that term advisedly. Newspeak, you remember, is from 1984, that George Orwell book, because that is what you're meant to do. You can't refer to people as sir or ma'am. You have to ask them for their pronouns and rubbish like that. It's worse than a joke. I mean, these people don't realize that they've become a caricature of 1984. So what's, for me, I think the main driver is that in Europe, they were able to, in a sense, because they became post-religious very, very quickly after the war. America never did. So nationalism is still very strong in America. Nationalism being strong in America, plus a post-religious society where the state does not clearly have a monopoly on the violence, becomes a very, very toxic combination, because these are people who still haven't ceded, as in the state had a monopoly on violence, but the gun law basically gives a certain law and order authority to every individual, which I find is socially very destabilizing. I know a lot of our friends who support the Second Amendment who don't like that, but unfortunately, we have to look at these things rather dispassionately, because, while I was there, I loved taking guns and going on shooting ranges and shooting and things like that. But, that's separate. We're talking about a lot of us who have a moral compass solid, who know how to use guns, who are going to do the right thing. We're not going to go berserk. A lot of people don't. And, you don't even need to cross the threshold of guns. So what you're seeing is a lack of the old forms of social control that had evolved over thousands of years, and new forms of social control being imposed by leftists in order to control society and mold it to their point of view. And to do this, they are doing what every left-wing society, every communist dictatorship has done throughout its history, which is suppress free speech, kick out people from universities and posts of learning and wealth and knowledge because they don't agree with your free speech, and so on and so forth. Why does this even surprise us? This was the method of the Soviet Union. This was the method of the Chinese Communist Party. This is the method of the new left in America.
See, the phenomena that we have seen is that more and more people are expressing themselves on social media. And social media, popular ones like Facebook and Twitter, are themselves gagging the voice of many people. In fact, many conservatives. So the effect, in India, the left and right is very confused. In US, the left and right is actually, in a democracy, the left doesn't make sense because in a democracy is elected by the people. So taking side of an opposition party is still democratic because you are part of some ruling coalition. So the definitions of left and right, which were applicable in the times of monarchy, is not applicable today in the times of democracy. Now, the same left and right definition will be applicable to Islamic countries because they have monarchy or a king is ruling them. But in case of India, it's highly skewed in terms of you don't understand where is the line, because the left is almost like a terrorist, is ultra right wing, and the right wing is actually the mainstream, which the media calls right wing is actually the mainstream. So majority of the Hindus are mainstream, and the terrorist element, or the people who are actually they are all in the forest in terms of Naxals and all those people. So why that distortion of the left and right occurred so squidly, dramatically against the entire definitions in which they started in India?
Look, I would disagree with that basic premise that left and right is irrelevant in a democracy. I think it doesn't matter democracy, dictatorship, monarchy. I think the left and the right are defined by two basically one principle, which is the collective versus the individual. Right? The left is always about the collective. The right is always about the individual, be it in terms of economics or anything like that. Of course, Ayn Rand, was one of those people that simplified it into very, very crude terms. But if you look at it, if you extrapolate it, it kind of works. I mean, for a much more complex set of reasons than you read in Ayn Rand's book. I mean, Ayn Rand's books are now positively childish in that sense. Right. But, she distilled the end result without understanding how complex it was in that sense. But what happens in India is that, the so-called right does not believe in individual liberty. It doesn't believe in economic freedom, and in that sense, so this is what I keep saying, Narendra Modi is to the left of the Communist Party of India. Right. The only thing he gives people liberty for is expression to abuse him, which he's quite open-minded about. He doesn't, you can keep abusing him. He doesn't really throw you in jail. The only people who throw people in jail in India for abusing them are state governments. The central government, the BJP central government, certainly hasn't done it. The Congress central government used to do it a lot. And you saw the latest example of that where Sonia Gandhi tried to have Arnab Goswami thrown in jail. So, first of all, these definitions of left and right, they're they're so screwed up even in America today in that sense. For example, the American right will talk about individual liberty all the way up to a woman's vagina and reproductive rights. And they're absolute communists. It is the collective wisdom that has to dominate a woman's vagina and a woman's right to choose, as opposed to everything else where individual liberty, including guns and shooting people, is individual liberty. Okay, so these kind of hypocrisies happen across all societies. I think the problem in India is we've never really had a right. We've had far left and we've had loony left. The BJP is far left, and then you have the ultra loony left. That said, it's also very important to understand one thing. The left in any country it has ruled has never been post-religious in that sense. They replace the old gods with their own gods, but there is always a deification and religiosity. You look at North Korea and the Juche philosophy and the worship of the Kim family. You look at China and the deification of, the slogan shouting and the little red books. And now Xi Jinping has, Deng Xiaoping tried to reverse that. And now Xi Jinping has taken back to that entire phase. In the Soviet Union, it was always talking about the leader and la-di-da-di-da posters and so on and so forth. You tell me one communist society that has not tried to replace the old religion with the communist religion and, glorification and deification of the individual. So, I think a lot of the modern problems that come about are because we don't understand what left and right is about. And we don't understand how to apply them across different phases of anthropological evolution. India is fundamentally a pre-industrial, extremely violent, largely rural, pre-industrial, underdeveloped society. America is, I would say, sociologically not as developed as, say, Europe. And when I say developed, I don't mean developed in the sense that it is somehow better, but in terms of what sociology says, Europe, and remember, sociology is a very left-wing, quote-unquote, science. Europe is considered more mentally developed than America is. Why? Because America is still very nationalist and a great emphasis on the individual. But you look at something right-wing like Britain, the kind of speech controls we have in Britain today, Margaret Thatcher would be turning in her grave like a, what's that fidgety fidget? What's it called? Those things that keep rotating? A fidgety spinner.
Yeah, like some finger
She'd be rotating like that if she saw the kind of speech controls that even right-wing governments, that even Boris Johnson has gone along with. Look, speech controls destroy creativity.
Absolutely.
Okay, at one point of time in Victorian England, they used to say, what is the definition of good manners? It's not offending people. The point is, those people aren't paying your bills. You're putting the bacon on the table. You're paying for your family. You have every right to offend as many people as you want. That the essence of freedom is to do what you want to do. And what these people are saying is, sorry, but you can't do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
And what amazes me is that fundamental point itself is whittling away so much of your freedom. And all these people are going on and on essentially about taking away.
Now, in last week, people who are going to the beaches, they were fined $1,000 each, and not even stepping out, just sitting in their cars and watching there is something known as bioluminescence. It happens in San Diego where the algae becomes blue, so waves look blue. It's a natural show by the gods, if you believe in that. So there people were fined. And the second thing is, there are many American Hindus who are socially active and politically active, and their voices are completely gagged out by the leftist Islamic doctrines prevalent in the copy editors of Facebook and Twitter. And so there is now any type of suppression, even Bhagavad Gita says that any kind of oppression cannot be successful. is going to come out in a worse way somewhere else.
Mm.
In America, we're dealing with that, and I think in India also, because these giants are there in India too. So there is, even though the Constitution guarantees free speech, but there is actually no free speech, because the
Yeah.
places where you actually do the free speech are gagging your voices. So this phenomena, they call it
So
deplatformization.
there's two aspects to this, right? The first is um, uh, uh, this salience that Hindus now have because the leftists are ganging up on them. When I used to be in Australia till about 2011, I was there from 1999 to 2011, 12 years in all. Uh, I used to be one of those people that used to hate ghettos. So somebody at a bar will come up and say to me, an Indian would come up and say to me, Indian. I'd be like, fuck off. Because, I was like, I don't identify with these racial stereotypes. I don't identify with these religious stereotypes. I'm just going to blend into whatever society. I make friends based on mental compatibility, not race, ethnicity, or religion, or whatever. But that was at a time when people weren't being attacked. Today, it is such a sustained attack. There is a much greater sense of community, of sticking together, and of protecting each other. And I think this is where, in a sense, Hindus really have to get a lot more organized, and they need to pick and choose. Rewarding that lady, what's her name? That horrendous lady. She looks really ugly. Jaipal? Pramila Jaipal, yes. Very ugly woman. I mean, both mentally and physically. I mean, what Indian in their sane mind will vote for or donate to that creature? Okay. This lady in the Seattle City Council, who was spearheading that resolution. And yet you will find that Indians will just rally behind these people. Why? I don't understand this sort of self-destructive thing. Remember, this isn't the world that we knew uh, 10, 12 years back. The world has irrevocably changed. The leftists have decided you are their enemy. Hinduism is their enemy. End of story. So, it's what Lenin used to say. You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you.
That's right.
Okay. And in the end, you don't want to end up becoming like the Chatham Islanders. The Chatham Islanders, right? So the Maoris, the same Polynesians who were part of, New Zealand, were also created the empire of Hawaii and things like that. They had human sacrifice, cannibalism, and all of that, but not on the Chatham Islands. They became very, very peaceful people. They didn't fight. Their method was always to go sort out problems. They would put stones. Whoever came up with an argument, whoever won that argument would put one stone on top of the other, and so on and so forth. So in the end, whoever had a higher stone count would have deemed to have won the argument.
Yes.
So what happened was, when the New Zealand Maoris were expanding, one night they land up at the Chatham Islands, and the Chatham Islanders thought, these are fellow Maoris, we can kind of understand them, similar language, we'll go do our normal thing with them. In the morning, that night, the Maoris attacked, killed them all, ate up most of them, and the 20, 30 survivors out of a few tens of thousands were forced into slavery. Now, if you want to pretend that this isn't happening and behave like an ostrich, be my guest, but you're going to end up paying the price for all of this. But sorry, there was a second part to your question, Nadi. What was that? One was this whole thing about Hindus, and there was a second part that you said.
The social media gagging the voice, leftist combined, leftist Islamist combined.
Right. So what happens with the leftist Islamist combined is, since they've decided that you are the enemy, they also control voices like Twitter and YouTube.
Completely.
Now, the problem is, in American law, because they are a private enterprise, you can't interfere. They're free to do whatever they want, as unfair as they are. They can be blatant about it. Okay. Not under Indian law. So this is where, we need to start pressurizing our government to go after the Twitter management and go after YouTube management, criminally if necessary, because it is a free speech platform. American laws don't apply here, and in that we can help the American right claw back a lot of things, because remember, India is a big market for all these companies. Okay.
Absolutely.
The point is, unless you do that, you are not going to build those bridges. For some reason, the Indian right never builds bridges with the American right. And the problem is, for the American right, I've noticed, their sources of reference to India are from the Indian left.
Correct.
Right? You look at people like Yuval Harari or Ben Shapiro even. When they read about India, it would be Ramchandra Guha and people like that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so what do you end up doing then? Because you can be the most hardcore American right winger, and his or her exposure to India will be through the left.
Yes.
So what do? But this is also where we need to introspect, because the problem is most right-wing Indians don't get into the arts. We get into the sciences, and we actually do things that actually do serious value addition. We don't faff around blowing enough hot air to replace the energy problems of India. If you actually connected up a voice to energy converter to their mouths, you could solve the energy deficit in India far better than any nuclear reactor or biogas plant ever could. But at some point, you have to focus on narrative. And what we're seeing is that this government in India just doesn't give a damn. Modi seems to think that the only narrative worth propagating is big crowds to welcome him that go, Modi, Modi, Modi. I'm sorry, but Modi isn't India, and India is not Modi. Okay, Modi is a tiny, irrelevant fraction of India. He will be here today, he will go tomorrow. He's a disposable commodity. Okay, and if he thinks otherwise, then he needs to be disposed of.
Now, coming back to you captured so accurately, and I give you hats off on that the American the right wing. So American right wing is a really extreme wing. There is another section called conservatives. They are not right wing. So majority of Americans are conservatives, at least 45%. And 55%, and there is a section of right wing also, which believes in pure European America and pure, they're Puritans. That is a different section altogether. But most of the people like India are mainstream conservatives. And that is across Democrats, across Republicans. And they have probably the same values as Hindus. They love their country, they love their culture, they respect India. And for them, this social media is a big enemy. They can't talk about abortions. They talk against abortion. They can't talk against spiritual. They can't talk on spiritual values. They cannot criticize any leftist loony, like you said, Premala Jayapal. She is a total leftist loony. They can't criticize her. If they criticize too much, they get banned. It's the same problem. And you pointed so well. The Indian law, there is a guaranteed free speech. So they can be tried in India, and American corporations are scared of that. Now, my question to you is that in India, is there a program? Because in the Indian government doesn't seem to latch on to the key strategic initiatives, especially when it's related to propagating a good value society. I won't say any ideology, but a good value society, whether you call it a dharma or a religiosity. So why doesn't Indian government create a consistent policy around that? India's attraction is
Tell me
Rishikesh,
honestly, Adi, have you heard Modi? Have you heard the level of his discourse? Do you really expect that kind of elevated thinking from this man? I mean, seriously, do you? I don't. I mean, I was hoping against hope that the speeches were more to masks and intelligence. Unfortunately, the speeches are an exact reflection of his low IQ. If you're looking for long-term strategic thinking from this man, forget about it. And as long as he is in control of the BJP, I don't think you should expect any of these things. That said, you raised an important point that I want to comment on all these things like YouTube and Twitter. Understand what is happening, what they are doing using American law. In effect, they are handing out quasi-judicial punishments, extra legal authority, okay, violating basic fair play, the right to have your own political opinions and things like that, inclusivity, as opposed to, you can't even believe in certain things anymore, and you will be fired for stating your beliefs, right? America was meant to be open for everyone,
Every,
including, if necessary, the racist.
yes.
Let's not forget that racists are people too. You can't just fire people for holding a racist opinion unless he or she actively propagates it or uses it against a colleague to harass or bully or denigrate. If they are not doing that, but if they hold a racist opinion, as I understand the American idea, even the most execrable racists have the right to live, to continue to do what they want. What these people are doing, what these corporations are doing now, is essentially extrajudicial, quasi kangaroo courts that they run to destroy people. Okay, and that is an extremely, extremely dangerous trend. Okay, and this is where I think India needs to come in, but I don't think we have the leadership to do it, because as usual, there's this saying in Kerala. The approximate translation of it is, it's like a pot on the simmer. It never comes to the boil. You can always see the bubbles, but it never boils over. And India's like that. It's always arriving, arriving, arriving. It's like, that song from Annie, tomorrow, tomorrow, it's always a day away. It's like that. India, India, it never comes. It's always a day away. It's like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're absolutely right in your assessment, because the world is very impressed by Modi, but they're also waiting for some action, and when that doesn't
Look,
happen.
I can honestly tell you they're not impressed by Modi. Okay. They feel that they have to do business with him. But you actually look at a lot of the internal assessments of these governments, they're not at all impressed with him. You remember that infamous episode of the Narendra Modi monogrammed suit when Barack Obama came? And everybody, on the first day, that was the story, that Narendra Modi wore the suit with Narendra Modi monogram. The pinstripes were actually Narendra Modi repeated. Now tell me, who was the only person close enough to Narendra Modi to have leaked that information out? Who got closest to Narendra Modi to have been able to see that the suit had Narendra Modi monogrammed on it? Barack Obama. They will not show you the footage of what he said and did off stage. But when he made that famous statement, when Modi made that famous statement, my friend Barack, he was giving his staff astounded views, because he had not, it's a lack of social etiquette, that you haven't moved to a first name basis with a person. You don't start addressing them by the first name. Okay. And that's the way it is. But nobody will talk about this. It's always projected as everybody's in awe, everybody's in awe. Just trust me when I say this. Nobody is in actual awe of him. They have to pretend. They have to go along. For example, every time Trump meets Xi Jinping is a horrible mass murderer who's holding millions of Muslims in concentration camps. But Trump isn't going to say, yo, my man, Xi, you're a murderer. Of course not. He's not. He's always going to be respectful towards Xi Jinping. He always says, my good friend, la-di-da-di-da. That doesn't mean he's in awe of Xi Jinping, is he? No. So, we shouldn't exaggerate these self-delusions and these hagiographing oneself that the narrative here tends to do.
Yeah, one thing you correctly, with this discussion, we find out strategic culture is definitely missing, and that is itself not dharmic, because dharma depends on strategic and much larger play than just talks. And uh, and with that, we come to an end of this discussion. Abhijit, it's a wonderful speaking with you all the time. I love your candor and your straight communication. Do you have any last words to say to conclude this discussion?
Yes, like Karl Marx said, last words are meant for fools who haven't said enough during their lifetime. Har Har Mahadev.
Har Har Mahadev. Thank you.